The bustling showroom of Alpha Motors was like any other car dealership. Shiny new vehicles lined the floor, sleek luxury models gleaming under the fluorescent lights, and a team of eager salespeople guided customers through the rows. The manager, Greg Harper, had always prided himself on running a smooth operation, ensuring everything from inventory to customer relations ran without a hitch. But today, something fell off. Greg was accustomed to the usual humdrum of his day-to-day responsibilities, making sales, overseeing staff, and maintaining the reputation of Alpha Motors as one of the top dealerships in the area. However, today was different. He had received a mysterious email earlier that morning from corporate headquarters. The message was brief, mentioning the arrival of a new CEO to oversee the dealership. It didn't provide much information, only confirming her visit. Greg didn't think much of it, chalking it up to routine corporate shifts. After all, in his 5 years as manager, he had seen multiple changes in upper management, and none had affected the dealership's day-to-day operations. But when a sleek black limousine pulled up outside the dealership around midday, his heart skipped a beat. Out stepped a tall, confident woman dressed in a sharp business suit. Her dark skin and poised manner seemed out of place among the sea of predominantly white faces in the showroom. She walked toward the entrance with an air of authority, her heels clicking against the pavement with purpose. Greg frowned. "Who's that?" he muttered under his breath, not recognizing her. He approached his assistant, Emily, who was standing near the sales desk. "Do you know who that is?" Greg asked, trying to hide the unease creeping up his spine. Emily glanced over and shook her head. "No idea, but she's headed straight for your office, Greg." Greg's mind raced. Was this the new CEO? There was something about her that didn't fit with his image of the high-powered businessperson he had imagined. He expected someone older, perhaps a little more reserved, not a woman of color with such a commanding presence. Regardless, he decided to meet her head-on. He straightened his tie, brushed off his suit jacket, and walked towards his office, where the woman had just entered. As he opened the door, he was met with the sight of the woman standing by the window, gazing out over the lot. Her back was to him, but there was no mistaking the confident way she carried herself. "Can I help you?" Greg asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The woman turned around slowly, her gaze piercing. "You must be Greg Harper, the manager," she said in a calm, authoritative voice. Greg's eyebrows raised. "Yes, that's me. And you are?" The woman smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Julia Westbrook. I'm your new CEO." Greg blinked in surprise. "CEO?" He glanced at her attire. "You're the new CEO of Alpha Motors?" "That's right," Julia said. "I was just appointed last week. I'll be overseeing operations here, along with a few other locations." Greg stood still for a moment, processing the information. "You? No offense, but I thought the CEO would be someone with more experience in the automotive industry." He instantly regretted his words. His discomfort was evident, but Julia didn't seem to notice or care. She stepped forward, her heels echoing against the floor. "You're right," she said, her tone surprisingly soft. "I don't have years of experience in the automotive world, but I have years of experience in business, and that's what this company needs, someone who can make tough decisions and turn things around." Greg didn't know how to respond. He had expected someone with decades of industry knowledge, not a woman who, by his estimation, was in her late 30s or early 40s. But of course he couldn't say that. Instead, he forced a smile and extended his hand. "Well, welcome aboard." Julia took his hand firmly, her grip strong and confident. "Thank you, Greg. I'm looking forward to working with you." As the conversation continued, Greg found himself struggling to accept that this woman, this black woman, was now in charge of the dealership. He tried to hide his discomfort, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. His mind drifted to the racial prejudices that he didn't even realize he carried with him. He had always believed in meritocracy, but deep down he had assumed that someone like Julia would never be in a position of such power. He quickly dismissed these thoughts, but they lingered in the back of his mind. The day wore on, and Julia's presence was felt everywhere. She sat in on meetings, asking tough questions about sales performance, marketing strategies, and inventory management. Her questions were incisive, her insights sharp, and before long, the sales team was buzzing with nervous energy. It was clear that Julia wasn't the typical CEO, she was hands-on, engaged, and expected results. Her leadership style was direct, and though she maintained a professional distance, her approach was refreshingly transparent. Greg, on the other hand, struggled to adjust. He had been at the dealership for years, and he knew how things were done. Now, with Julia in charge, everything felt uncertain. She wasn't like the other CEOs he had worked with, the ones who relied on their teams to handle the day-to-day while they focused on the big picture. Julia was involved in every detail, asking questions Greg didn't have answers to, scrutinizing every aspect of the dealership's operation. It made him feel small and insignificant. A few days passed, and Greg's frustration began to build. He had always prided himself on his leadership, his ability to manage a team, and run a successful business. But with Julia watching his every move, it felt like his competence was being questioned. He began to feel resentment toward her, though he couldn't fully explain why. Was it because she was a woman? Or because she was black? He told himself it had nothing to do with either. After all, he had worked with women and people of color in the past. But deep down, he couldn't help the unease he felt. One afternoon, Greg received a call from corporate headquarters. The conversation was brief but unsettling. Greg, the voice on the other end, said, "We've received some complaints about your interactions with Julia. It seems there's been some tension. We want you to smooth things over and ensure everything is running smoothly under her leadership. Do you understand?" Greg clenched his jaw, feeling a surge of frustration. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. How could things have gone so wrong? He had always been a professional, but now everything felt off. The next day, Julia called him into her office. She looked calm, but there was a certain intensity in her eyes. "Greg," she began, "I've noticed something that's been bothering me." Greg's stomach churned. "What is it?" Julia leaned back in her chair, studying him carefully. "It's the way you've been treating me. I'm not sure if you realize it, but there's a lack of respect in your demeanor. You've been dismissive of my ideas, avoiding eye contact, and even making comments that I'm sure you don't realize are offensive." Greg's heart sank. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He had no idea that his actions were being perceived this way. He had only been trying to assert his position to maintain control over his dealership, but it had backfired. Julia wasn't the type to back down. She wasn't intimidated by his attempts to assert authority. Instead, she had met him head-on. "I'm not going anywhere, Greg," she continued, her voice steady. "I'm here to stay, and I'm here to make this dealership successful. I need you to either get on board or step aside." Greg's mind raced. This was the moment he had dreaded. His pride was on the line. His career was on the line. But at the same time, a part of him respected Julia. She had come into his territory, taken charge, and made it clear she wasn't afraid of him. The next day, the tension in the dealership was palpable. Greg tried to swallow his pride and work alongside Julia, but it wasn't easy. The resentment still simmered beneath the surface. But Julia didn't back down. She continued to lead with confidence, making difficult decisions that ultimately turned the dealership around. Her leadership was unconventional, but it worked. Over time, Greg began to respect Julia, not just for her business acumen, but for the way she held her ground. He realized that his initial discomfort had nothing to do with her race or gender. It had everything to do with his own insecurities and resistance to change. Julia Westbrook wasn't just a black woman in a position of power. She was a brilliant leader who was determined to succeed, and she did. And so, the dealership flourished under her guidance. Greg learned to let go of his pride and accept that sometimes the best leaders don't fit the mold. They shatter expectations, challenge assumptions, and prove that success isn't about fitting in, it's about standing out. As for Julia, she continued to prove her worth, earning the respect of everyone around her. She wasn't just the CEO of Alpha Motors, she was a symbol of resilience, strength, and the power of breaking barriers.